Hey guys, how's it going? So today I'm going to be doing a presidential election prediction update. I haven't done one in a while, so I thought I'd go ahead and do that. Surely a lot has happened since my last one. So right now, if we look at the polling average, Biden is leading by around 8.4 points. The DNC just happened. Biden did see a bump. His polling average tanked significantly today, but that is mostly the result of one outlier poll that had like 2,500 people, so it's weighted extremely heavily. That's what I think it is, at least. So it dipped from above 9 to 8.4, but he's still polling pretty strong, above 50%. So I'm just going to get right into it and start going off with some of the likely states. I have the Democratic color selected, so we'll do the likely states first. So the first likely states that I'm going to do for the Democratic Party are Nevada, New Hampshire, and Colorado, and Michigan. So Nevada, Colorado, and New Hampshire are all polling extremely well for Biden. Historically, they went for Clinton in 2016. There's really not much debate there unless Biden tanks significantly and goes on to lose the election. In Michigan, this is definitely one of the states that's viewed as more competitive in the group. However, Biden has maintained a strong polling average. Most experts have this state rated as going into the Democratic column, and he really hasn't been seen too vulnerable polling-wise in the state of Michigan. A lot of polling being done. I do think that Michigan is going to go blue pretty heavily this election cycle, so I'm going to put that in the likely column. In the Republican side of things, Texas, Iowa, and Ohio. On the fence right there is kind of Georgia, but I'm not going to classify it as that just yet. So Texas, Iowa, and Ohio, all three of these states were at one point leading for Biden or seen as extremely competitive. However, as time has moved on, even as Biden's polling lead was in 9 points range just a few days ago, Biden still wasn't winning in these states. It seems like they have sort of trended towards Donald Trump in the election cycle, and they are stronger Republican states than most of the swing states that we are going to be looking at today. Just historically, the expert ratings all have these states as either toss-up or more favorable for the Republican Party. And if you've watched any of my videos, you do know that I think that Donald Trump will be a little more competitive on election night. I do think that some of the polling biases that happened in 2016 are still existent, but again, not to the extent that they were in 2016. I do think they've been adjusted a lot, just not quite enough. So I do think that Iowa, Ohio, and Texas are going to go to the Republican Party by a pretty likely margin unless something pretty drastic changes and we see that Biden has a strong lead in these states going into it. So the next column of states that I'm going to be doing is the lean states, and that is Minnesota, Pennsylvania, for the Democratic Party, and then for the Republican Party, I'm going to put Georgia in the lean column. So right now, no candidate has over a 270 votes within the lean and likely and safe margin. So that means that I do think that likely there's going to be a lot of toss-up points that are extremely contentious for this race. And so all the states left on the board, I do think could solidly go either way on election night if the polling remains the same. However, let's talk about the lean states that I just classified. So Minnesota is probably the one that you're looking at the most right now, and I classified Minnesota as a lean just because there's been a lot of polling data coming out of Minnesota that shows it extremely vulnerable for Democrats at pretty much every level, the presidential and also the Senate election. Tina Smith is even seen as vulnerable. So there's been a good amount of polling. People had been neglecting Minnesota because they just figured if polling was strong out of Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin for Joe Biden, then it would be stronger out of Minnesota just because Hillary Clinton was able to carry that state in 2016. But polling does not indicate that as the case. In Georgia, this is another state that's polling pretty strong for the Republican Party. I do think that it's a little more competitive than Iowa, Ohio, and Texas, but I still think that it's going to go to the Republican Party. Also, just with the voter suppression that happens in the state, it's probably ground zero pretty much for voter suppression in this country. So I think that Republicans will also have an advantage there. Pennsylvania, I do think that it is the most solid of these states for either party. The polling out of Pennsylvania is pretty strong, but not quite as strong as Michigan. Most experts do have this rated as going to the Democratic Party, so that's why I have it in the lean Democratic column. And now we can move on to our tilts. So the first tilts that I'm going to do are the Republicans, and that is going to be Maine's 2nd congressional district. and also North Carolina. And those are my two tilts for the Republican Party. North Carolina and Maine's 2nd Congressional District. First, the Congressional District is a pretty solid one for Donald Trump in 2016, and the polling data out of Maine and in some of these northern states just hasn't been as strong for Joe Biden that I think it should be if we want to say that it will reliably go to Joe Biden in 2020. I think that it could, but I still think that it leans towards Donald Trump just given the margins that he had in 2016. North Carolina, I think that the Senate race in North Carolina is extremely strong for the Democratic Party. However, pulling out of North Carolina, although Biden is doing relatively well, I still think that there is a bias in statewide polling in North Carolina towards the Democratic Party. I've seen some statistics that suggest that, and I also think that he is just going to be a little weak in the South this election cycle. But no. If we look at North Carolina, I think that North Carolina is going to be one of the most competitive states, but the polling averages were really just sort of on the line. It could go either way, but I just think that it's going to go to Donald Trump because I think that Donald Trump is going to perform a little bit better in the future, especially after the RNC bump. We'll see what happens, but that is just my opinion right now. And then going into the final round of states, so we have Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District, we have Wisconsin, we have Arizona, and we have Florida. So all 4 of these states and district I put in the tilt Democratic column. So Wisconsin is the most vulnerable of the Rust Belt states in my opinion. Polling out of this state is among the most vulnerable for the Democratic Party. Also, we just saw that in 2016 it went to Donald Trump by the largest margin. I think that if we look at 2018 results, there's a strong case for Democrats to do really well, paired with polling data coming out. But if we also look at expert ratings of Wisconsin, it's surely the most vulnerable, so that's why I have it in this column. Florida, the polling, again, looking very strong for the Democratic Party. However, when we look to expert ratings and 2016, we can see that Florida is going to be really hard to call. It seems like there is a built-in Democratic bias in the state, just that you really cannot eliminate from election to election. Last election cycle was something crazy, like 7 points or something like that. So Florida, I do think is going to go to the Democratic Party, but I could feasibly see it going to the Republican Party very easily. And then Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District, this is one that went to Donald Trump in 2016, but polling data coming out of the 2nd Congressional District has been looking pretty solid for Joe Biden. I do think that it will go to him, but again, I could see it going either way. And finally, Arizona trending towards the Democratic Party. Polling data coming out of here showing around a 4-point lead for Joe Biden at the moment. These states that are trending towards the Democratic Party, I definitely think that polling data that shows them ahead is an extremely good sign. I think that if they're ahead at this point in the election, then they will surely be ahead on election night, because it's kind of hard to go against the trend, especially if you're already losing in polling data. So I do think that Arizona is tilting towards the Democratic Party, but because that polling lead has fluctuated very rapidly, expert ratings are kind of all over the place on the state of Arizona. I have it listed as a lean Democrat or tilt Democratic, but I could see it going either way. So this is my final electoral map. We see that it is Joe Biden with 319 and Donald Trump with 219. This is my election map as of August 26, 2020. I'll update it in a few weeks. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. All right, see you later.